At the start of the story, we are introduced to a woman named Samantha who is searching for a way out of a dense forest. As she navigates through the trees, she comes across an old cabin. Filled with apprehension, Samantha cautiously steps inside, only to find it deserted. The cabin contains an old radio and some packets of snacks on a table. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaching sends a shiver down her spine, and she quickly hides. A man enters the cabin wielding an axe. The sight of the axe intensifies her fear. As soon as the man exits the cabin, Samantha seizes the opportunity to flee from the spot, running as fast as she can to escape the looming danger. While running, Samantha accidentally bumps into the same man with the axe and falls, injuring her leg slightly. The man, who introduces himself as Tom, reassures her that he is not a killer and there's no need to be afraid. Tom then carefully bandages her injured leg. Samantha initially assumes that the cabin belongs to Tom, but he explains that he has been trying to find his way out of the forest for the last 3 days without success. In fact, Tom was on his way to visit an old friend in another city when his car crashed, stranding him in the forest. He has no phone to contact anyone for help. Samantha shares that she and her husband were heading to his old family home when their car broke down. Her husband went to look for help, but has not yet returned. After their conversation, the scene shifts outside the forest. Somewhere in the city, Kevin and his girlfriend Jody were embroiled in a store robbery. Holding the storekeeper at gunpoint, Jody demanded all the cash. However, when the storekeeper hesitated to open a second safe, Jody impulsively shot him. Simultaneously, in a different part of the forest, Tom was trying to start Samantha's car but found it wouldn't operate due to a complete lack of fuel. During their conversation, Samantha explained to Tom that she had stayed behind because she was pregnant and her husband had advised her to wait in the car given the cold in the late hour. She had left a note for her husband in the car before she and Tom headed back to the cabin for shelter. The following morning, Tom intended to transfer fuel from his car to Samantha's to help her get back on the road. Unfortunately, as he was carrying the fuel back, the sound of gunfire startled him, causing him to drop and spill the fuel. Concurrently, Samantha stepped out of the cabin and stumbled upon Jody, who was lying unconscious nearby. When Jody awoke, her initial fear upon seeing Samantha was quickly eased when Samantha explained her car trouble and assured her of her non-hostile presence. Shortly after, Tom joined them and corroborated the story of his own vehicle troubles. This reassured Jody, although she was initially suspicious, thinking they might be trying to deceive her. Tom persuaded her to remain with them, arguing that it was unsafe to leave, especially after the recent gunfire. Jody, albeit reluctantly, agreed to stay with them for safety. Curious about Jody's predicament, Samantha asked her how she had ended up alone and in distress. Jody shared that following a heated argument, her boyfriend had unceremoniously left her stranded on the road and driven away, leaving her to fend for herself in the unfamiliar and perilous woods. The next morning, Tom and Jody separately set out to find a way out of the area. After a while, exhausted, Jody returned. As Jody and Samantha engaged in conversation, they realized that they were from different cities, each hundreds of kilometers away from where they thought they were, which puzzled them greatly. Both felt as though they were still near their own cities, which seemed impossible. Meanwhile, Tom spent the entire day searching for an exit, but ended up circling back to the same cabin. Jody mentioned to Tom that Samantha was making confusing statements, claiming they were in Newham City. When Tom confronted Samantha, he informed her that they were actually in South Dakota. This revelation shocked all three of them, as these locations were significantly distant from one another, and none of them were ready to accept that they were not near their respective cities. This discrepancy led them to suspect that something very strange was happening. They had run out of food and water. If they didn't act soon, they would likely starve or die of thirst. The next day, the three of them worked together to find a way out of the forest, when suddenly Jody tripped over something and fell. This led them to discover a hidden bunker stocked with some food and drinks. Inside the bunker, there was a map written in German. Samantha knew a bit of German because her father had been a German soldier who died in an airstrike. Hearing this, Jody remarked on the incredible coincidence, as her father had also been a soldier who died in the jungle, and her mother had been killed on the day she was born. They took food and drinks from the bunker and continued on their way, but somehow ended up back at the same cabin, even though they had walked straight ahead this time. Tom then shared that if anything happened to him, no one would come looking because he was an orphan. His mother had been executed. Samantha, noticing the large amount of money Jody had, asked her how she had managed to accumulate such wealth. While examining a note, Samantha suddenly starts laughing because it had a future date written on it. Jody asks her what she means by that. Samantha tells Jody that the year is 1962, which surprises Jody because she thought it was 1985. Which explained why she had notes from 1984. At that moment, Tom returns from outside. Both Samantha and Jody ask Tom which year they are in, and Tom declares it's 2011. This revelation makes them even more anxious, as they realize not only are they from different cities, but they seem to be from different times. Samantha believed it was 1962 2022, and Jody thought it was 1985. Yet according to Tom, they were in the year 2011. They wonder where and when they actually are, not knowing any definitive answers. They ask Tom if a time travel machine had been invented by 2011, suspecting that Tom might have brought them there. Tom explains that technology in 2011 wasn't advanced enough to create a time machine. As they were discussing this, they suddenly hear someone approaching from outside. A man with a gun, speaking German, appears and takes all three hostage, tying them up inside the cabin. The following morning, a man named Hans forcibly took Tom out of the cabin and tied him to a tree. Tom tried to speak with Hans, but Hans couldn't understand his language. Hans then returned to the cabin and started questioning Jody about their identities and reasons for being there, but Jody couldn't comprehend his inquiries. Only Samantha had some understanding of German. During the interrogation, Hans noticed a locket around Jody's neck and questioned her about its origin. Samantha then revealed that she possessed a similar locket. This information troubled Hans, as he also owned an identical locket that contained a photo of his wife. Astonished, Samantha recognized the woman in the photo as her mother. This revelation led them to realize that the German soldier was actually Samantha's father, placing them around the year 1945, the era her father lived in. Confused and intrigued by the connections, Hans brought Jody and Samantha back to where Tom was tied, bringing all characters together in a bewildering encounter across different timelines. Samantha asked Tom if he had a locket as well, to which he replied negatively. However, seizing an opportunity, Tom managed to untie himself and attack the soldier, successfully taking him captive instead. The situation was confusing for everyone as they struggled to understand what was happening. Seeking clarity, Samantha then turned to Jody with a personal question, asking when her birthday was and if her father's name was Adam. It was then revealed that Jody was actually Samantha's daughter. This revelation deeply moved both of them, as they were overtaken by emotions upon discovering their familial connection. With this new understanding, Samantha realized she would die on the day Jody was born, and her husband Adam, who had left to seek help, would also perish in the war. Overwhelmed with grief, Samantha left the cabin in tears, grappling with the tragic fate of her family and the poignant reunion with her daughter. Tom then reveals to Jody that he is actually her son and that he had a locket similar to hers. He explains that his mother was executed for a murder she didn't commit, and subsequently, he was raised in an orphanage. Jody denies his claims, asserting that she has neither been married nor is she pregnant. Tom, overwhelmed with emotion, accuses her of being a thief who murdered a shopkeeper. He further explains that he was born in jail shortly before Jody was executed for murder and theft, and that his father, named Kevin, who was also Jody's boyfriend, was killed by the police. Jody, struck by the truth in Tom's words, begins to cry. Moments later, Samantha informs Hans, who she reveals as her father, about her discovery of being his daughter, though she admits she is unsure how she ended up in this situation. Samantha then releases Hans, who decides to leave to complete his mission. The group then contemplates why they have all ended up in this mysterious situation. After much deliberation, they come to a grim realization. All of them are destined to die soon. Hans is expected to be killed first, followed by Samantha, who will die in a hospital. Jody will be executed, and finally, Tom will commit murder and then take his own life. While staying in the cabin, the group experienced what they initially dismissed as a nightmare, yet it was a vision of their possible future. In the dream, each person met a tragic end, leaving them unsettled upon waking. Tom, realizing the gravity of their situation, asserted that if they were to survive, they must save Hans, who was destined to die in an airstrike. Soon after, the distant sound of explosions confirmed that the feared airstrike was imminent. As the reality of the impending danger became apparent, they tried to convince Hans of the danger and the need to alter their fates. However, Hans was skeptical and dismissed their warnings, leading to a heated argument between him and Tom. During the altercation, a shot was accidentally fired from Hans's gun, striking Jody. In a desperate bid to save her, Tom urged Samantha to find a way to help Jody, fearing that losing her could cause them all to vanish, as their fates were intertwined. Tom attempted once more to stop Hans, leading to another scuffle during which Hans fired his gun again. This time, however, the bullet missed Tom, and as the reality of Jody's death set in, Tom began to fade from existence, his presence tied to Jody's survival. In these final moments, the air raid they had feared began in earnest, with bombs starting to drop around them. This time, Samantha successfully convinces her father, Hans, to flee with her to the safety of a bunker to escape the impending airstrike. During their escape, Samantha stumbles on a rock and loses consciousness, but Hans manages manages to carry her to the safety of the bunker. Shortly after, both Jody and Samantha mysteriously vanish from the scene. The narrative then shifts to the year 1985, where Jody is seen shopping in the same store that was previously targeted in the robbery. As she leaves the store, we see that Kevin, accompanied by another girl, is attempting to rob the store, indicating that what was destined to happen will indeed take place, but with different individuals involved. This time, however, Jody is not part of the robbery. She is now living with her mother, Samantha. The film concludes with Jody and Samantha walking together along the seaside, smiling contentedly, marking a happy ending to the story. This film encapsulates a complex narrative of intertwined destinies across different timelines, reminiscent of the themes explored in the series Dark. Initially, in the timeline of 1945, Hans is killed in an airstrike. Samantha was the daughter of Hans. Shortly after Hans was killed in an airstrike, Samantha's mother remarried. However, tragedy struck again when both her mother and her new husband died in a car accident. Left alone, Samantha later married a soldier named David. When Samantha was pregnant, David was called to serve in a war, where he ultimately fell in battle, leaving Samantha without anyone to care for her. David's family had never been fond of Samantha because she was an orphan. This disapproval persisted, and shortly after the birth of her daughter Jody, Samantha passed away, leaving Jody as an orphan too. Despite their initial reluctance, David's family begrudgingly raised Jody. Feeling isolated and unsupported, Jody eventually chose a life of crime and teamed up with a man named Kevin to engage in robberies. During one of these criminal acts, Jody killed a shopkeeper, but she was soon arrested. By the time of her capture, Jody was pregnant and gave birth to Tom in jail. Due to her crimes of murder and theft, she was sentenced to death, and upon her execution, the police placed her son Tom in an orphanage. Kevin, Jody's accomplice and the father of her child, was also killed by the police. As Tom grew up, he eventually succumbed to anger and committed a murder himself, deeply regretting his actions afterward. Racked with guilt, Tom ended his own life, thus completing a tragic cycle where each member of the family met a grievous end. This sequence of events constituted the original timeline set to unfold for this family. However, fate intervened, offering them a second chance to alter their destinies. In the second timeline, Hans survives the airstrike, leading to a significant change in the family dynamics. As a result, Samantha's mother never remarries. When Samantha grows up, she marries a soldier named David. This time, both of Samantha's parents are alive, so she is not an orphan. This changes how David's family views and treats her. They respect her and care for her deeply. Especially during Samantha's pregnancy, David's family takes great care of her, ensuring her safety and well-being. Consequently, when Jody is born, Samantha's life is not at risk, and she survives the childbirth. In this alternate timeline, Jody avoids becoming an orphan, thanks to her father, David, being the only family member who dies in the war, while her mother remains alive and well to nurture her. This nurturing and stable home environment plays a crucial role in keeping Jody away from the life of crime she had previously fallen into. With her mother's guidance and support, Jody grows up on a much different, more positive path than before. Additionally, in this new reality, Tom either isn't born, or if he is, Jody is not his mother, showing a dramatic shift in outcomes from the original timeline. This narrative showcases the powerful impact that changing one single event can have across multiple generations. It highlights the ripple effects that one alteration in the timeline can have, affecting not just immediate family members, but also the broader course of their lives. This change emphasizes the importance of familial support and its profound ability to guide individuals away from adverse outcomes. If you have any questions or need further clarification on this story, or if there's anything else you'd like to discuss, please feel free to drop a comment. I look forward to exploring more intriguing movie plots with you soon.